Welcome to Khanversations. I'm Muqtada Khan. Today I'm going to talk to you about the allegory of the cave described by Plato in his Republic. In Book 7, Socrates, in a dialogue with Glaucon, talks about the allegory of the cave. The allegory of the cave is essentially an invitation to pursue philosophy and pursue reason as a means of seeing the truth. But I feel that the allegory of the cave also helps us understand the condition in which we exist today, how our thought process, our capacity to know the truth is being constrained by ideology, by social media, by television channels, and elaborate manufacturing of perceived reality by corporations and governments, and our own unwillingness to be dogged in a pursuit of what is behind the story that is shown to us. But before I start discussing the allegory of the cave, please subscribe to Khanversations and ring the bell icon. So what is the allegory of the cave? In Book 7 of Plato's Republic, Socrates essentially has a dialogue with Glaucon, to whom he tries to explain the challenges that we face in knowing what is reality really. So what Socrates is trying to do is to communicate with Glaucon the difficulty of knowing what is reality. So he describes the allegory of the cave in order to make Glaucon think about the distinction between reality and perception, and the truth with a big T and small truths with a small t, and also the role of philosophy in making the distinction between small t's and big T's. So the way he describes this is he says, imagine a cave with an entrance which then has a steep drop, a steep slope, which leads to an enclosure where there are several prisoners which are being held. These prisoners have been tied in such a way that they cannot turn left or right and look at each other. They can only look at the wall of the cave in front of them. So they are essentially stuck like this, staring at the wall. Behind them, there is a shorter wall, and behind the wall is a light, a fire, and some people are holding objects in front of that fire in such a way that the light that is coming from the fire only projects the images of these objects which are being held, and those images are falling on the wall in front, and those are the images that the prisoners are seeing. They're seeing nothing else. And the prisoners consider that this is reality, that these are real objects. They don't realize that these are images of the real objects that exist behind them, because they cannot see the real objects. They see what the images show them, nothing more. They can't even have a dialogue with each other so that they can name and discuss the nature of what they are perceiving. But if one of them becomes free and looks up and then turns around, he will see the source of the light and then realize that what he had been seeing so far were only images, but that they were really three-dimensional objects which were in existence, which he had missed so far. And that is an important realization. But Plato makes it much more complicated. He says, but when this particular prisoner looks at the fire for a moment, he's going to be blinded by the fire and dazzled by it, and therefore he will not have clarity of what he's actually seeing. So even if he tries to communicate with his prisoners what he's seeing, his communication is not going to have the clarity and the persuasiveness for them to believe him without seeing what he is seeing. And then Plato goes forward and says, let us imagine that this prisoner is then dragged straight up slope and out of the cave, and then he sees the sun, and then he sees the world outside. So obviously for a period of time, he is completely blinded by the brilliance of the sun and the light of the sun, and is not able to see anything, but eventually, slowly, he begins to see the vast beauty of the world that is revealed by the sun. And obviously he understands beauty, understands goodness, and his ability to see the real in the light of the sun is what Plato then calls as the good. And then obviously this prisoner realizes that he wants to go back and share with other prisoners what he has seen. And so if he goes back into the cave and down the slope, once again, he's overwhelmed by the darkness, and he's once again loses his sight, and he's also dazzled all over again. And he's unable to communicate what he has seen. I don't know why Plato needed to insist that he was dazzled, even if he was coherent and was able to articulate with great clarity what he had seen. I think the other prisoners would have had difficulty in believing what he was saying, because for them, the only reality was what they saw on the wall. Plato says that they might even ridicule him and maybe even make fun of him, because what he was saying was so bizarre and so different from what they were seeing. So this is the allegory of the cave, and Plato is trying to communicate that we are prisoners of our conditions, and the human condition is such that we are unable to communicate with each other. If the prisoners could communicate with each other, they would probably have a better understanding of the images that they were seeing on the wall. They could have shared understandings. They could develop knowledge of it and memory of it and say, oh, this image occurs so many times, let's call it this, and let's call it that. And then they would be able to communicate something, build a history of the images that they were seeing on the wall. And then, to me at least, what I find fascinating about the allegory of the cave is that the prisoner, once he's become free, is essentially unshackled his thinking. He was in a state of unenlightenment, and now he's in pursuit of enlightenment with an unshackled mind. And so he's able to look around. So this capacity to look back and recognize that I was imprisoned until now, but now I am free. And now I can see the fire, and I can see these people who are holding the objects. This capacity to realize this comes from an ability to transcend the cognitive reality in which you exist at that moment. And that becomes a kind of critical thinking. I think it's critical thinking which will make us free, so that then we can look at what we had been seeing so far and thinking of it as the truth is really not the truth, but just images of the truth. And that is an important part. But then being taken out, for Plato, the sun is reason that will reveal the goodness of the world, the beauty of the world, and the truth with a capital T. And to me, that is the pursuit of enlightenment, the pursuit of excellence, the pursuit of ihsan. As you become more and more curious, go up the slope, go out and discover the power of the sun, of reason. And then you have now escaped the constraints that you were in until now. And I see those constraints in today's age and time. They are ideologies, they are nationalist sentiments, they are organized religious discourses, they are discourses coming from ethnicity, they are political parties which are creating these images using social media, using television channels. They are manufacturing a reality and imprisoning us, and so that we are not looking around, we are not communicating with each other, we are not able to have a shared understanding of the reality that we are being made to see. And so that is, to me, very important. So I think the pursuit of truth in the capital T is what education is all about. That's what dialogue is all about. That is what, for Plato, it's just philosophy, but for me, it is becoming an enlightened and critical thinking citizen of the country, to be able to escape these shackles which make us see what we see as the only truth to the exclusion of everything else. So the allegory of the cave, while it was initially, I guess, articulated to emphasize the importance of philosophy and epistemology, it also throws light on the constraining role of ideology, of organized religion, of political perspectives, etc., and essentially shackles us. So in order for us to have our minds free, we should have the courage to look around us, to communicate, to climb up the slope and step out of the cave. If you have found this discussion useful, please share it with your students, your colleagues, your friends, and don't forget to subscribe to Khanversations and ring the bell icon. This is Muqtada Khan signing off. And until next time, be safe, be thoughtful, be critical.